Hello, everyone, and welcome to this virtual masterclass on self-development and transformation. My name is Desiree, and I'm a digital marketing specialist here at Headspring. I'm your moderator today. We would love for you to send in your questions during this masterclass for a Q&A towards the end. You can do that in your masterclass window, and hopefully we will have time to address it towards the end. With me today is Álvaro González Alorda. Álvaro is an associate professor here at Headspring and a visiting professor at an array of different top universities. He also has his own consultancy, Gap, that is specialized in transformation management. And he is the author of 3 books, Los Próximos 30 Años, The Talking Manager, and most recently, Head, Heart, and Hands, a journey of personal transformation, a topic which this masterclass will touch on today. From personal challenges of what it means to transform, to building character, change habits, and how to build on specific competencies. This and more will be covered in today's masterclass. So without further ado, a big welcome to Álvaro. Let's begin.
Thank you very much, Desiree, for inviting me to this webinar. And thank you, everybody, for spending the time of sharing with us this webinar. The title that we gave it is Self-Development and Transformation. And we believe this is a topic that is always relevant, but probably nowadays is even more relevant. That's why we want to share some ideas that what we do at Headspring through this content. So I'd like to start by telling you something. I believe all of us here today belong to the same generation, regardless of age, but the same generation in the sense that we've been together through something that I'm about to explain. And I like to call this generation the bridge generation, the bridge that crosses from the analog world to the digital one. Maybe the youngest cross this bridge wearing short pants, playfully distracted. And the eldest probably cross this bridge with heavy weight under our shoulders. Upon our shoulders, the weight of responsibility, of family responsibility, of professional responsibility. But it doesn't matter, it's all the same. Now that we are at the other side of the bridge, sometimes maybe overwhelmed by or fascinated by the changes that technology brings along, and sometimes maybe overwhelmed by the anxiety of living us in such a hyper-connected world, I believe it's time to stop and think. I think we are a kind of a unique generation, the bridge generation. We are the generation that has been exposed to the highest level of change in history. No generation has ever been asked to learn so many things in so little time. But on top of that, all of a sudden, we find this situation, this global context of a global pandemic, which is quite overwhelming, surprising, difficult to understand. Over the last couple of months, I've been privileged enough to work with different leaders of different companies in different industries and in a good number of companies across Europe and America. And I can see a common thread. I've been seeing all of them struggling to understand the size of this storm we are going through. They've been trying to measure how big are the waves, how strong are the winds, and where do they come from, and try to make some sense out of all this complexity we're going through. And one thing is for certain, they've been very focused on trying to take the right strategic decision. At the same time, they've been busy stabilizing the operation of the business. That including having people working from home and the challenge that it presents to everyone, to companies and to each one of us. But this is a huge challenge, but it's not the only one. There's probably a challenge that is more important. It's the challenge that you and I have as individuals. And the challenge of how do we want to see ourselves when the storms fade away? How do we want to see ourselves when those dark clouds disappear in the horizon? Probably when everything finishes, if this ever finishes, some people will find themselves fat, while others will find themselves fit them ever, probably. Some people will have taken advantage of this time to cultivate themselves, while others will be addicted to different substances, alcohol, drugs, pornography, gambling. Some people will be neglected in the sense that they will have spent a ridiculous amount of time watching series, while others will have taken advantage of this opportunity to define a more balanced intellectual diet that including not only some series, but also books, management books, history books, literature, good articles, some podcasts, you name it, but they will have defined an intellectual diet for these months. Some people, I'm afraid, will have contributed to weaken or to deteriorate their families and their relationships, while others will have contributed to strengthen them, in spite of all the difficulties that we are going through. But again, it's about a personal response to this context. And when you think about the biggest challenge that we have going through this storm, I would say that the biggest challenge that we have is building a character that allows us to tackle, to embrace the leadership responsibilities that we have, whether it is leading a small team or a large organization, but probably something more important, your own family. So it's all about building a character that allows us to inspire others to change their habits. And this reminded me of a story that happens in 2009. You probably remember this story. The plane, a US Airways plane landing in the Hudson River. It was an early morning in New York. This plane took off, and after a couple of minutes, a flock of migratory birds entering both engines, resulting in a rapid loss of power. So the captain called the base and said, I have to land as soon as possible. The base said the closest airport where you can land is 6 minutes from your position. So the captain takes a very strong decision from a leadership standpoint, that of landing in the Hudson River. And now the story told by someone who was sitting in the first row of that plane that very day. This person was there. He felt something wrong with the plane, like anybody else in the plane. And then he hears the captain saying through the speakers, we're heading to the Hudson, fasten your seatbelts and prepare for impact. These final words are the words that they use when something is really wrong. So the guy comes to the conclusion, we are going to die. We are all going to die. And no one is going to be saved from this. And he doesn't have much time to articulate in that moment how to overcome this situation. But there is a thought that comes to him that there are 3 dimensions in his life that doesn't work, that don't work. The first one is constant discussions with his wife. And he doesn't like it. He doesn't like the way he sees himself and the way he's managing his family. The other aspect is he's spending more time in the office than necessary, not because he has such a lot of work, but because he's, frustrated with his family life. And on the third place, he's seeing his children less time with their eyes open than with their eyes closed. So he feels he's not ready to die. If one can be ready to die at all, ever. But happily, no one died. They landed in the Hudson River. They were rescued. But when this person got home that very night, he broached a pending conversation with his spouse about their relationship, about their family, about the time he was spending with their children. And they took very bold decisions to rebalance their family life, their relationship, and the quality of the time he was spending with his children. So this guy accomplished an extraordinary transformation through an extraordinary context, being about to die in the river. And I don't want to diminish at all the value of this transformation. But it's way more difficult to accomplish an extraordinary transformation through ordinary times, through ordinary contexts. So I believe that taking advantage of what we are going through right now in this global pandemic is an extraordinary opportunity. It's a call for transformation, for an extraordinary transformation. So we can profit if we enter in the adventure mode, in the transformation mode of taking advantage of it. But well, we're talking about transformation very much, and this is a buzzword that everybody's using. Everybody's talking about digital transformation. I would like to give you some ideas of what been my thinking over the last 15 years, working at Emergap and teaching at Headspring on transformation. So I have an early conclusion about transformation, and it is that our capacity to transform depends on our capacity to inspire. But again, inspiration is another buzzword that I would like to define first by what is not to be inspired. I don't think to inspire is to occasionally dazzle someone like a deer caught in the headlights. Because we can dazzle people maybe because we are quick in numbers, or we are skilled for negotiation, or maybe we have a lot of experience in a particular area, or maybe we know how to arouse epidermic emotions in the audience when we speak and people cry and we feel like so inspiring. But I believe that that doesn't have to do anything with inspiration. I think we live in such a superficial and such a sentimental culture that we run the risk of calling anything inspiring. And that's why I think this quote from Oscar Wilde is brilliant when he says that a sentimentalist is simply one who wants to have the luxury of an emotion, but without paying for it. Like wanting to get to the peak of a mountain by helicopter without experiencing first the effort, the step-by-step effort to get to the peak of the mountain, and then later the joy of getting to the peak of the mountain through our own effort. And this tendency that we see nowadays for the quick satisfaction, for the instant gratification, probably explains this tendency that happens also in organizations which leaders are incapable of inspiring their people. They try to outsource the inspiration to motivational speakers to make them feel epidermic emotions for a while in a corporate event. But people don't change by listening to transformation talks or to motivational speakers, not at all. I believe that someone inspires you to change when that person moves you to change your habits and transform who you are. And that is a responsibility of any leader in any context. It could be family context or professional context. The classics would say that there are two types of habits. Positive habits, they call them virtues. At the beginning, hard to acquire. After a while, you enjoy them with a certain degree of easiness. And then we have negative habits, and they call them vices. For this latter, you don't have to make any effort. You just have to let yourself get carried away, and you get all the bad habits you can imagine. So in this dynamic of creating new habits or getting rid of old habits, I think it's interesting to consider three dimensions: the head, the heart, and the hands. The head, because if you want to develop a new habit, you need to give good reasons for that to the person. Then you need to go down to the heart, arousing the desire for change. But you only get the change done until you get it to the hands, to the real transformation, to creating habits, thus building a character. Let me give you an example. I suppose that all of us today are not dedicated to professionally to manufacture. We are not paid by the strength of our muscle or our capacity to carry weight upon our back. I don't believe so. I suppose we are in the manufacturing business. We are paid by the vitality of our intellect. So in that sense, it seems reasonable that the reading could be an interesting habit to acquire. I was suggesting to somebody recently that she should read like 20 books a year. And she said, you know, I don't think I have ever read 20 books in my whole life. And then I said, well, that is not a big problem, because if you start with 20 books this year and you read another 20 next year, and the next year another 20. In 5 years' time, in 100 books, how will you be? How will your capacity to understand the human being, your intellectual vitality, your communication skills, your capacity to navigate through the human soul, through the National Geographic of the new human soul, how will you be after 100 books? So this person kept thinking, and I would like to translate into this head, heart, and hands. So you may think, okay, reading is good for me. 20 books sounds challenging, but reasonable. I will do it. Then you go down to the heart and you actually design a reading list for these coming years. But you only develop a habit when you actually open the book every day with your hands. So in other words, you are the responsible, the protagonist of your own self-development. So this is something that you cannot outsource to human resources, not even to different business schools that provide you with programs. You are the protagonist, and you have to use all those resources to your advantage, to your strategy of the personal development. Another message that I would like to underline is that transformation hurts, like taking a diet or following a demanding training program. And another thing that I would like to emphasize is that we all need mentors in this process. So traveling alone is way more difficult when you have a mentor that inspires you, that challenges you, that accompany you through your transformation journey. It makes a whole difference. So in the business of being mentor or mentor people in their transformation journey, what does our capacity to inspire depend on? How we can inspire people to change something as challenging as acquiring a new habit or getting rid of an old habit? I mean, what does our capacity to inspire depend on? And I found this quote from Warren Buffett brilliant when he says that in hiring people, he looks for three things: integrity, intelligence, and a high energy level. But if you don't have the first, the other two will kill you. So it's all about integrity, it seems to be. Of course, integrity in regard to something, values, I suppose. You need to have values. You want to be integral to. And then when you think about your values, it's important to realize that values are not hereditary. So it's not that my parents have great values and then I have those values. No, I need to develop those values for myself. And values don't have a lifetime guarantee. So I could have lived according to my values for many years, but then lately, given these circumstances, I'm kind of betraying these values. So what are your values? What are my values? Do you stand for something greater than yourself? Do you stand for something greater than the way you feel in this particular moment of your life? Do you stand for something greater than the proven volatility of our own feelings and emotions? That we know for certain that they are so volatile. What are your values? Are you willing to struggle for your values? How much are you willing to struggle for your values? Do you live the way you think? Do you do what you say? I know these are difficult questions. I have asked these questions to myself many times. Every time I go through them, I feel like uneasy. I feel uneasy because I've experienced my own fragility. And I know that even if you have great values and beautiful values, we are all fragile. We make mistakes very often, every day. So difficult questions like this idea from Gandhi: a man, a woman cannot do right in one department of his life while he's occupied in doing wrong in another department. Life is one indivisible whole. Can I be a great father and a bad boss? Could I be a great colleague and a bad brother? That doesn't work. We are the same person. So if you feel, like I feel many times in my life, that you are not so inspiring, that your capacity to persuade others to change nothing less than their own habits is not so spectacular, If you feel sometimes that you don't have that inner strength that leader has to look people in the eye and say, I encourage you to change that habit. So if you feel you don't have that inner strength to inspire others, probably because you have made mistakes and you don't feel so easy about your mistakes and you don't feel like qualified to be so transformational, there is a piece of good news. And the piece of good news is that there is nothing more inspiring in the world than a person who struggles to improve. And no matter how low we have fallen. So I believe there are two ways to recover integrity, that inner strength that we need to inspire others. And the first one is quite simple and quite challenging at the same time, is asking for forgiveness to whomever we need to ask it for. Could be a spouse, a friend, a colleague, maybe to God. Forgiveness liberates the soul. That is why it is such a powerful weapon, says Nelson Mandela. And I would add that forgiveness also empties our backpack and allows us to travel light, to travel free. So asking for forgiveness would be one of those activities that could help us to recover our integrity. And the other, quite simple as well, is making commitments to improve. Very, very specific. So if you don't know where to start, you can ask your spouse. She will tell you. He will tell you very clearly where you need to improve. In case of doubt, you can always ask your mom, and she will complete the list for you. That is for sure. But we all need to work on very specific things every day to recover our integrity. And again, 3 responsibilities of a leader. I believe there are 3 responsibilities that you need to broach and tackle every day if you have any leadership responsibility. The first one is obviously strategy. And it's very, very often we see top management people so focused on the operation that they don't spend enough time strategizing, thinking collaboratively with their peers on the challenges that are coming ahead. And then we have the second, which is people development, so easily outsourced to human resources. And this is probably one of the biggest tragedies in developing people in organizations, is when the leaders of the organization, far from developing their people, they outsource this to human resources, which is a great partner, but they are not the responsible for developing people. They are a partner, a platform, and they provide some resources. But each leader is the real responsible of developing, I would say, not only business results, but also organizational greatness and people well prepared to, and that's a way to create, how can I put it, sustainable organizations, sustainable leadership, developing people. So in other words, the difference between a leader and a mere manager is her ability to tackle these 3 responsibilities. And if you only tackle the operation, and we see many people in top management positions that are only involved in the operation, you are not accomplishing your responsibility. But of course, when it comes to people development, it's not a theoretical approach on how someone should be developed. We need to start with ourselves. So people development starts with personal development. And only through this personal dynamic of development, we can help others, not just by preaching every now and then on our experiences in leadership. So I've been thinking about this in the last 15 years. I wrote 3 books. The 2 first were written maybe 10 years ago. In these last 10 years, I've been thinking about transformation. I never found the time to write anything on transformation because all the ideas that I have was writing through a methodology, taking a methodological approach to transformation, and the idea never took off. By the way, this is a book, the book that I've written recently. Actually, it was published a couple of months ago, Head, Heart, and Hands. And this book captures this methodology, but in a very different way. The way that I intended to approach this book, it was not through the methodology we'll cover in a minute, of self-development, but through a very personal story, that of Sarah. So I found a way to write a book which is putting a real character of all those stories of transformation within. And then here is Sarah. She's 32-year-old, sales manager, 12-people team. She lives in Boston, but travels very often to London, Copenhagen, Berlin. She's been in all the business schools. She has taken all the programs. She's done all the academic tourism she could do, and that's fine. But she's going to be promoted to vice president, and she's told that she should take a program this year. They gave her the money, and she decided to do something that she thought it wasn't too demanding. So she went online, found a mentoring program, and then applied for a mentoring program. And then we have the other character of the book, which is Oliver. Oliver is someone from England. He was born in Windsor. He studied at Oxford. By the way, I'm in Oxford this week, and I will come back to Spain as soon as the situation gets a little better. So he studied in Oxford, and this Oliver is a very successful manager. So he has top management positions for over 20 years in different countries in Europe. And then he marries a beautiful woman, wonderful woman, Valentina, an Uruguayan, and they go to live to Punta del Este, Uruguay. So he has an early retirement. They buy a house. They are in front of the ocean. They walk the beach every morning with their dogs. And during the day, Oliver takes mentoring sessions. As I said, Sarah is let's say, highly developed woman, but kind of superficial in the sense that she's smart, she's quick as a squirrel, but not very disciplined. While Oliver is the other way around. Oliver is super disciplined, super strict, and they embark on a transformation journey. And this is the beginning of the book. Of course, I'm not going to tell you the book, but the book tries to capture what the transformation and self-development process entailed. So let me go back to the methodology, because this is a program that we teach at Headspring in different formats. And the goal of what we try to achieve here is helping people in organizations to develop themselves in a mode that anything that they do, any course, any program that they take, really profits and benefits their careers. So I will go very quickly through this process. You need to start your self-development process with a good diagnosis, and then you have to define the strategy. And to have a very specific plan, you need follow-up and feedback. But then going back to Sarah, when you start a transformation process, it's very critical to understand the personality of the person in question. You probably know very well this assessment, personality assessment, which is a DISC: dominance, influence, steadiness, and control. Let me go through it very quickly. But before I go through it, let me emphasize that we are human beings. We are not quadrants. This is just a tool. And it's critical to understand that when you use these tools, it's just for the sake of trying to understand people better. But you need to be very open to change your mind when you see a person through time, because it's very easy to label people with a dominant person, a control person, or an influence person. So it's a tool. We are more complex than this, but it helps to get to know people faster. So dominant people tend to be very decisive, very competitive, very direct, but at the same time, they tend to be individualistic and aggressive. Individualistic in the sense that they find their ways of deciding what they think very quickly, and they find a little boring to validate their thinking with others. So they tend to be a little individualistic. And sometimes in the way they present their ideas, they could be aggressive because they are so focused on what they are saying that they lose peripheral view. And they are not so able to capture how people are reacting emotionally to what they are proposing. So these are dominant people. And we have people of influence. These are passionate, communicative, holistic. They are like a squirrel jumping from branch to branch. Their mind is very agile. And the problem is they tend to be undisciplined and impulsive. Then we have steadiness. These people are very empathetic, collaborative, diplomatic. They enjoy very much working together with other people. They are very flexible, but they don't enjoy very much conflict. So they avoid conflict or tend to avoid conflicts and tend to be a little passive and a little conservative, because if you want to do something bold in your life, you need to struggle and to fight with reality, and they don't enjoy much fighting. And then we have control people, analytical, systematic, formal. They enjoy very much doing things with quality. The problem is that they can become a little perfectionist, and this perfectionism can lead them to be inflexible with other people, especially if they dislike them. So anyway, these are these quadrants, and there are, of course, all sorts of combinations. But going back to Sarah, Sarah is clearly dominant and influence. So she's determined, competitive, and demanding, but at the same time distant, individualistic, and bossy. That's how she finds herself through the assessment. An influence, sociable, innovative, and passionate, but at the same time undisciplined, impulsive, and flicker. So when you're developing yourself, you start from your personality, your passions, your context, and that all that need to be considered. But then now you have to define the strategy. And the same way companies have strategic priorities and then projects, we need in personal development challenges and then competencies. We'll come to your competencies in a minute. So development challenges, let me give you the example with Sarah. From transactional leadership to transformative leadership. Why she has that as a development challenge? Because Sarah she's very smart, she's very quick, very straightforward, very dominant in a sense. And the type of mode in which she is all the time is accomplishing her goals. So if something gets in the way, she just makes that problem disappear the way she can. And so she tends to be a little transactional and the type of communication that she establishes with other people is from brain to brain, not from heart to heart. So if you really want to connect with people and to help them to change and to contribute to their transformation, the brain to brain communication is not enough. So if you want to have a heart to heart communication, you need to enter into the other person's kitchen. And the only way to enter in the other person's kitchen if they open you a door, a little window, or maybe a crack, and allow you to enter to their kitchen, to their intimacy. But the only possibility that you develop that kind of communication is that you open your own door to your own kitchen. So if you are a little rational, distant, individualistic, it's quite unlikely that people connect with you at that level. So she's understanding that it's not only about achieving the professional and business goals, but also developing her team and developing like greatness, organizational greatness. So this is the first priority for her development. And the second is personal discipline and a work system. Why personal discipline? Because she is very passionate, but she's very undisciplined at the same time. She's struggling with her digital tools. She's jumping from platform to platform. She's texting all the time. So she starts her communication through WhatsApp, and then she jumps to email, and then she jumps to a different platform. And she's struggling to answer all those emails. Every night she's reading emails and sending emails. So she needs to work on her personal discipline, also from a very personal level, in the sense she doesn't sleep or she has to sleep. She doesn't do the exercise she should. Her diet is a little chaotic. So she will start with personal discipline and then a work system, because she has a very complex team in different countries, and she needs to develop a way of working that is more productive and more simple. So those are the two challenges that she identifies through the mentoring process. But then that's nothing until you anchor those challenges into something that you actually can work on. And then it's when it comes to this model of competencies we've developed over the years, when we've been helping companies to achieve a transformation. After several years, we realized that there are 12 competencies that are critical to contribute to the transformation of an organization. Of course, we are not going to cover them all This is something that we use in our Headspring programs. But there are two competencies chosen by Sarah through an assessment. She realizes that she needs to develop closeness and to work on digital tools. So her strategy looks very much like this. Development challenges, transactional leadership to transformative leadership, personal discipline work system, and these two competencies are meant to help her to develop these challenges. Closeness is a critical step to be able to connect with people in not in a transactional way. And closeness is developing real interest, a genuine interest in the others, in everyone, not only in the people you get along with easily, but with everyone you have to interact, and not only within your business unit or department, but also with everyone else in the organization. Developing that kind of heart-to-heart communication is a challenge for this kind of people, but you will see in a minute, she's really, really focusing to developing that competence. And the other one is digital tools. The only way to learn to teach something to others is to learn it before. So she needs to learn how to use her digital tools before he creates a work system that is more advanced and sophisticated to her team. But now, again, we look at this, we have a nice diagnosis and an interesting strategy, but this is nothing until you do something about it. It's all about habits. So the way of anchoring this to reality and to their day-to-day life and to her life is through developing a transformation project. So she's working on this project on closeness. We use this template that I'm not going to cover now, but it's important to identify what's your problem or what's your opportunity in this particular competency, to establish a general objective that sets a strategy of this competency, to find specific objectives, to have an implementation that is composed of learning resources. You need to study something related to these competencies to actually being able to know more and to put into practice what you're learning. And it's critical to introduce into your daily life and to your weekly life very specific practices that help you to develop the competency. So when you get to this level and you do a nice follow-up, and for instance, let me show you another thing that Sarah did. Since she has to work on closeness, she designed this little card that she takes to different meetings. And at the end of the meeting, she passes this card along to the people and say, I'm developing the competency closeness through active listening, which I've defined as showing genuine interest in what the other person want to say, listening with the eyes and not interrupting, and summing up to validate. How do you evaluate me during this meeting? So she goes to every meeting and people at the end say, okay, I believe you're bad in this meeting, or you were fair or good or whatever. So this is a very simple way of measuring how you are making progress in this company. Anyways, so we're going through this strategy, diagnosis strategy, anchoring into competencies and projects. And this is something that we developed in one of our programs on self-development to help people really own their own personal development. But I would like to finish this presentation, this webinar, by telling you a very personal story. This is my father. In the early 50s, he was a young pilot on a base in the south of Spain. And someday, one mechanic arrived saying that we got a new plane. It was actually a German plane. He asked, who wants to try this new plane? And my father said, I will. So the mechanic explained, this plane has a little problem. The problem is that sometimes in the middle of the flight, the engine stops. But you don't worry. There is a lever here that you can use, pushing it back and forth, and then the engine restarts. So my father said, all right, I can do that. So he took off. He was flying around Seville, in the South Spain. It was a base close to Seville. And all of a sudden, he sees this beautiful avenue, Avenida de la Palmera, Palm Tree Avenue, at the heart of the city. And it was empty. It was early in the afternoon. People, I suppose, were sleeping siesta. So my father saw the avenue empty. the engine was working well, but for the sake of having fun, he stopped the engine, smoothly landed in the avenue against the wind. So he did it successfully. He managed to get a phone and phone the base saying, I got this emergency landing, of course, with many quotation marks, and I need help. So the base sent a truck to pick up the plane and carry it to the base again. So when the mechanic arrived with a truck and they were disassembling the wings of the plane to put it in the truck, my father asked the mechanic, what is this lever for that you told me? And the mechanic said, forget it, it's just. And then my father said, I really want to know. And the mechanic said, all right, don't tell anybody what I'm going to tell you now. I won't. So you see this lever, there is a cable, follow the cable. So my father followed the cable, and the cable wasn't connected at all to the engine of the plane. It was connected just to a little spring attached to the fuselage of the plane. So my father said, what is this about? And the mechanic said, okay, don't tell anybody, let me explain. I told you that this plane has a little problem. You see the lever? We told you that this lever, when the engine stops, you use this lever and the engine restarts. But the truth of the matter is we don't know what's going on with this plane. We only know that after a few seconds, when the engine stops, it restarts. You don't have to do anything. But to avoid pilots jumping with a parachute and the plane crashing, we give you this lever to keep you entertained. So that was the mechanics of the 50s. When my father told me the story, I got two conclusions. The first conclusion that I got was that now I know why my father has been always so understanding with his children, because we've made mistakes. But probably when you have such a past, you tend to be more understanding with your siblings and with your children. But the other conclusion that I draw from this story that my father told me is that life is way more interesting when we take risks. Because when we take risks, we get to learn more and faster. My father got to learn something very valuable at that base in that moment. That lever, that such a tricky lever was a tool to save your life. But then when I think about how my father got to learn something so valuable, it was through taking a risk. The risk, first of all, of piloting that plane, and secondly, it was a risk of doing something forbidden, which is landing in the middle of the city. So I would like to finish this webinar by proposing something to you. It's something risky, but at the same time, very beautiful. And it is the risk of embarking yourself and your team on a personal transformation journey. Not just acquiring some skills, taking some courses and programs, but going through a very deep transformation at a personal level. And we will be very glad if you invite us to accompany you through this journey of transformation. So thank you very much. I hope these ideas on self-development and transformation are relevant to you. We'll be delighted to accompany you and your teams through one of our programs at Headspring. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. That was really, really interesting. We have some questions that came through.
Very well.
So given the disruption created by the coronavirus, what's the role of human resources in nowadays organizations?
Well, this is an interesting question. I think I said earlier that one of the problems that I see nowadays in organizations is that the outsourcing of development to human resources. So many leaders believe that it's not their responsibility, or that if they just go through the feedback 360 every year, or if they do the evaluation at the end of the year to identify the level of bonus that people are going to get, that doing their job. And I believe that is not enough. So human resources, I believe, is a great platform to create a dynamic of self-development within the organization. So to me, it's a very critical role, because the world is changing so fast. You need to develop competencies and new ways of working so quickly that if you don't have this self-development acquired in every leader of the organization, it takes a long time to develop people, way more time. So to me, human resources are critical as a platform to dynamize the development of the organization, but especially through self-development.
Okay. Another question is on development. Is there a limit to how much we can work on at once? I know myself that, when this lockdown started, I think many people, including myself, had at least 5 things they wanted to work on, read books, learn a new language, this and that. So how should you set the limit?
Well, I think the critical idea would be having a strategy. So if you don't have a strategy and you jump into very different competencies and things you want to develop, you will very likely fail because it's probably too much. I think the critical part would be designing a strategy for development that is connected with your personality and your passions and who you are. And once you have a strategy, you need to select a couple of competencies, but I will start with one at a time. Once you've mastered one competency, you can follow with the other. And in our experience, 60 days is a nice time frame to develop a competencies. A couple of months working on something, and then you can say, okay, this is a sort of natural in me. Now I can jump into another competency. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. So another question we received is, you mentioned earlier that transformation hurts. Can you explain a little more on this idea?
Recently I was told by someone that you need to focus, this idea of you need to focus on your strength and not on your limitations. And I think that's reasonable. But at the same time, sometimes we need to focus on our limitations, especially, I'll give you an example. For instance, someone that is undisciplined and at the same time has great communication skills and she's very passionate and she's great at selling and great at connecting with people. She can flow through communication, but if she doesn't fix her lack of discipline, she's not going to flow as much. So if you really want to develop your strength, you need to work also on your opportunities for improvement. So, and that work could be boring, could be challenging, and definitely it hurts. So if it doesn't hurt, you're probably not developing yourself. That will be my quick answer.
So I guess the saying, no pain, no gain, is quite accurate.
Exactly. That captures very much the idea.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question on values themselves, and I guess this is quite relevant now. I'm sure many people in the audience saw that many Facebook employees went against what their leadership team decided on Trump posts. What if the organization you work for doesn't share your values? What's the best way to handle that? And I guess it's specifically relevant as well if you're the influencer type is passionate.
So can you say the question? I didn't get exactly the question you're presenting.
Sorry. So what if the organization you work for doesn't share your values? What's the best way to handle that?
All right. Yeah, that's a challenging circumstance. I think our areas of influence is limited, but at the same time, I haven't seen any organization with a list of values listed in their website that you really dislike. You can like them all. The problem is that when you don't see those values incorporated in the lives of the leaders, and then sometimes you can blame your organization through your leaders. So I don't like my leaders. I don't enjoy their values, and I don't feel inspired by them. My suggestion is, even if you're not in top management, you have still an area of influence. So if you work on making those values alive through your own life in your context, you will get a level of influence. Hopefully, if other people do the same, even if you have the best bosses, you can contribute to the transformation of your context. But if not, it could be a great excuse. I don't like their values, so I won't do anything. But there is something we always can do. And I would encourage everyone to contribute to the transformation of the people around them.
Great. Okay. In terms of uncertainty, how can we encourage our team to truly believe in developing themselves?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Over the last 3 months, I think I have like 50 one-on-one mentoring sessions with top management people in companies in Europe and America. Mm-hmm. What I've seen is at the beginning, people were like in between surprise and then thrill with this new thing of working at home. But over the weeks, I've seen people falling down in the sense of when you realize so many things you have to tackle, and then the difficulties, and then, you know, people are distressed and they don't feel so well. And so I believe that this context is challenging all of us very much. But we all need to find a way of recovering ourselves quickly and working on our development and taking this as an opportunity. And not only to do it with ourselves, but to helping people and being very sensible with the people around us. Because sometimes you see people on a video conference and they look well, but sometimes you see something that this person doesn't look well. So making a phone call later, how are you feeling? What about your family? How are you dealing with this? I think we all need each other. So we need to check very quickly if we realize that some people are unwell in any sense. So being very attentive to people, paying attention, being close to them, and at the same time, presenting them ways of developing themselves, not just contemporizing very much with their feelings, but also using this burning platform that we are going through to develop some changes, and not forgetting that transformation hurts.
It does indeed. Okay, how would this content fit as a part of a wider leadership program?
Well, I think this, interesting. The problem is when you go through academic tourism, which is, I took this program last year. Now this year I'm taking this other program. I did this workshop on this competency. And then the rest of the time, I am in operating mode, business mode. And then there's nothing happening in between those programs. I think this program is designed and is meant to help people, leaders, and anyone in the organization to own their self-development so as to make profit of any development activity that they do. So it's learning how to translate anything you need to work on into something incorporated to your daily lives, to your routines. It's all about developing habits. So this is how you combine this with other programs.
So what do you think about this idea? I know some companies do this when they have an allocated amount that employees can choose to spend on their self-development. So it's not a set, not a set program, a set course, or it's up to the employee itself. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea?
Well, I believe of course you can't send everybody to programs. Sometimes you have restrictions, but my suggestion is making sure that there is like a portion of the organization that is well trained on self-development. Because if you incorporate self-development in top management, you can somehow spread that knowledge and that way of working through the organization. So this way you can have some people taking programs, some other people not taking programs, but you don't need to take a program to develop yourself. So it's a combination of having your inertia of self-development, and if you can, take a program. So that way you can balance the organization resources in a nice way.
Okay. And I guess this is our final question for this masterclass. Where is the fine line between professional mentoring and personal mentoring?
All right, interesting question. When you are spending, I would say, my whole professional life on transformation and helping people, you realize that at the beginning, these relationships through mentoring, through teaching, through consulting, they start in a professional context and very respectful, and that's all right. But when you get along with people, it's so easy that it develops into friendship. Of course, different kinds of friendship, but I believe friendship is key to be able to contribute to the transformation of other people. So if you keep it too safe, too professional, and there is no human connection, there is no heart-to-heart communication, it's very hard to contribute to the transformation of people. But the truth of the matter is that we can't connect at that level with everyone. But we do with some people. And here is a challenge, is not losing the opportunity to connect at that level with the people you feel inclined to connect to. And if you contribute to the transformation of several people and others contribute to the transformation of other people, all together can contribute to the transformation of the organization, the whole organization. So my suggestion would be, don't be afraid of connecting deeply with people. And through that friendship, you will see changes, as we see every day, that are far more than developing skills. We see broken families reuniting. We see broken people redeveloping themselves and rebuilding themselves. So that only happens through heart-to-heart communication.
So I guess, but if you have say you're a leader of, you're the head of a team of 15 people or so, how do you can you somehow make the friendship trickle down through the organization? Is
Okay, I
that
think yeah, that's a good question. I think your responsibility as a leader is developing the flexibility to adjust to very different personalities and learning to love very different people. So if you just like people like play like you, that's so easy, so simple. But if you have this capacity of understanding and value the beauty of different personalities, but yeah, that requires a lot of training and effort. But it's not a tactical thing. It comes from your heart. It depends how you see people. Because if you have this transactional view, you will see problems and not people. So I would start by reviewing how I look at people, developing my transformational leadership, getting to know people well, making the effort to know them well, connecting with everyone heart to heart. Of course, we won't get at the same level with everyone, and then doing our best.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Alvaro, for this masterclass. It was really interesting and I'm sure very useful for both me and everyone who joined in. I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in this Wednesday morning and everyone who submitted questions. Do have a look at our website, headspringexecutive.com, where you can sign up for more masterclasses and also watch the masterclasses that have already been aired on demand. I guess that, yeah, stay safe and until next time. Thank you again, Alvaro. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.